Hello, true crime and wine time friends. Thank you for joining me, your host, Terry Dussault, as I dive into the Harvard murder that went unsolved for 50 years. I decided to cover this case as I had the opportunity to visit Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the Harvard campus, and I have to say I was highly impressed. Cambridge, Massachusetts is the home to Harvard and MIT. So yes, there are a lot of smart people here. But I want to tell you about my wine pairing today, which I want to say thank you to my friend Shannon over at wine.com for referring me to this wine that I'm going to be tasting. It is the years.Originally Chardonnay 2012, and it is a shimmering pale yellow in color. On the nose, it reveals aromas of vanilla and broche with hints of honey, and this is a well-balanced wine, ample and generous in the mouth with flavors of almond paste and vanilla. The finish is bright and fresh. So I'm going to open this, and we're going to see if it lives up to their toolage, I guess. Hold on, let me open this. There we go. Not a real big cork pop there. Nice little pour as I run into the microphone. What a beautiful campus and town. The leaves were turning and it was chilly and windy, but beautiful and so very different from Austin, Texas, or anything I've seen before. However, even in this beautiful setting at an elite campus, horrific things happen. As I walked around the campus and walked by the location where the murder happened, I was struck with a sadness and also relief knowing that the family, the town, and Harvard finally knew what had happened. Now let's get into the story. After a quick sip. It was a crisp and cold day in Cambridge, Massachusetts on January 7th, 1969. When James Humphreys went to his girlfriend and classmate's apartment of Jane Britton. Humphreys had last seen Jane the night before when they went ice skating at the Cambridge Common. Humphreys and Britton returned to her apartment around 10:30 p.m., with Humphrey leaving around 11:45. Now, there's some confusion around what happens next, but I'm going to say mostly the story I found that I'm going to say was accurate was Jane went to see her neighbors to talk about her upcoming exams and have a glass of sherry. But other stories say Humphreys was the last to see Jane alive. Either way, the next day, Humphreys went into James' apartment located at 6 University Road. He knocked and rang the doorbell, but did not get an answer. James then tried the doorknob and found the apartment unlocked. And thankfully, he decided to go next door to the neighbors, the Mitchells, who were friends of Jane's, so that they, along with him, could enter the apartment. The Mitchells and Humphrey entered Jane Britton's unlocked apartment and found her face down on her bed in her blue nightgown and covered with a rug and a coat. The bed was full of blood, and there were large lacerations in the back of her head. Jane Britton was a 23-year-old anthropology graduate student at Harvard at the time of her death. She was the daughter of J. Boyd Britton, the vice president at nearby Radcliffe College. Jane was described by everyone as a smart and funny young woman. Jane had recently done fieldwork in Iran and in France and was preparing to finish her exams before writing her doctoral thesis. The Mitchells told police that Britton often left the door unlocked so that they could access her refrigerator. Friends, you know me, I got to jump in. I have to say this is a little crazy. I would have given my neighbors, especially if they're friends, a key to your door instead of leaving your door unlocked, especially at night. Hello, overnight. Anyway, and again, I'm going to say it's not me, but I would have. Not only did Jane leave her door unlocked? There was not a lock on the ground floor door to get into the building, which explains how James Humphreys was able to get into the building. And I'm going to say, hell no, especially if the ground door doesn't lock. I'm not leaving my apartment unlocked. I'm not worried about people stealing things. I'm worried about people coming in and doing exactly what they did, something horrific. Now, I have to tell you, you would think by this address and the fact that this building was owned by Harvard that it would be all swanky since it was uptown, but it wasn't. Based on articles, they described this building like a South End slum with the smell of urine, with dark, dreary green, peeling painted walls. Granted, reports state her rent was only $75, which is a bargain, even in 1969. Still think they could make the door locks work downstairs. I must also tell you that this building had seen murder before. In May of 1963, Beverly Sammons was stabbed to death in her apartment in this same building. A year after Sammons' death, Albert DeSalvo, also known as the Boston Strangler, was arrested and confessed to her murder along with 13 others. So police were confident it was not the same person. Thankfully, this apartment building was torn down and a new building was erected. You can see the picture of the new building that I took on our website at www.truecrimeandwinetime.com. The medical examiner said Jane had been dead 10 to 12 hours before she was found. The police had very little hard evidence to go on in the case. They did have a witness who said they heard someone on the fire escape the night of the murder, and one witness who spotted a man running near the building in the early hours the next day. The autopsy showed that Jane had died of massive skull lacerations from multiple blows with a sharp object. The medical examiner, Dr. Arthur McGovern, suspected it could have been a handheld hatchet or a meat cleaver of some sort, or could have been a peen hammer that archaeologists use. Due to the lack of hard evidence, the police spent a lot of time interviewing neighbors and friends, and the theories were vast. Was it a crazed sex person? Was it an old boyfriend? Was it someone jealous? Or was it a fellow archaeologist from their group? Or was it a drug-fueled college student? Jane's friends said that they knew a lot of people in Cambridge were odd, and Jane kind of meshed with everybody. She got along with the acid heads, hung around with the bohemians out in the courtyard, and some of Jane's friends and family said she was a straight-laced girl and did not party, while some of her Harvard friends said she went to a lot of parties. Now, mind you, just because she went to parties doesn't mean she did anything wrong, but could it be a clue in who murdered her? Based on reddish-brown powder that was found on Jane's body, police also wondered if it had something to do with her work in anthropology, as the act of sprinkling a reddish-brown powder on a deceased body is consistent with some ancient burial rites. Okay, this is just weird and sounds like somebody is reaching to me, but let's continue. Cambridge Police Chief James Reagan ordered a media blackout in the case due to inaccuracies and speculations he had read in the media. Many speculated the blackout was ordered due to the release of the following information about the reddish-brown powder. Professor Stephen Williams, the chairman of the anthropology department at Harvard, told the Globe that the powder was similar to red ochre, hope I'm saying that right, an iron ore mineral powder which is used for many things, everything from pottery to paintings. And it was said that Jane had this in her apartment on different paintings on the wall, pottery, different things, but it was also on the ceiling. Prior to the media ban, police said that based on evidence, the killer stayed in the apartment for some time following the murder, and that the cigarette ashes and blood were found in an ashtray. There was no evidence of a struggle, and neighbors did not hear any screams for help. And the media ban has never officially been lifted. The Mitchells, Jane's neighbors, were given a polygraph and both passed, while James Humphreys, her boyfriend, refused a polygraph based on advice from his attorney. And true crime friends, I'm going to just pop in and say, I don't think you should ever volunteer for a polygraph test. They are unreliable, and always do what James did. Get an attorney before speaking with the police for your protection and protection of the case. Now, the people in Cambridge were afraid. Was there a random person killing young women again? Now, I don't live in Cambridge, and it's been 50 years later, and I'm afraid, listening to this story, things are starting to get a little complicated. Now, in February of 1969, a 51-year-old Cambridge widow was murdered, and police investigated the two cases to see if they were connected. Or was a new murder meant to throw police off of the trail in Jane's murder? Or was it not related at all? Now, the police had two suspects that they wanted to talk to at the time. One was a fellow Cambridge academic who had left the country shortly after Jane's murder, and the second was a stranger who was seen in the building where the 51-year-old widow was murdered. Now, there are similarities to the case. Both women were found dead in bed. Both of them had been battered with a blunt object, and there were no signs of a struggle in either crime scene. Miss Bean, the widow who was beaten and killed, she was beaten more extensively than Jane. And if it was the same killer, why did he not sprinkle that brownish red powder on Mrs. Bean? So many questions, and the police were still looking for those two suspects that they wanted to talk to. Along with the neighbors, friends, and others who knew Jane took lie detector tests, or they offered up to take the test. 10 to 15 witnesses also gave testimony before a grand jury in February of 1969, as the witnesses were archaeologists and they were leaving within upcoming months. I found this to be odd since there was no prime suspect in the case, but on the other hand, I'm glad that the police said, okay, they're going to be gone out of the country. Let's go ahead and get this information. One friend told reporters that she thought another archaeologist who was connected with the museum was the person who killed Jane, but that person died in 1990. But her and her friends still believed he was the killer. Don Mitchell, Jane's neighbor, said that they had unfettered access to the apartment, so they could take anything they wanted at any time, and that the police failed to properly secure the crime scene. Now, guys, this is wrong. We all know police need to mark off a crime scene. People shouldn't be going in and out and just helping themselves. What if there's evidence? I know we didn't have DNA back then, but who knows what could have been found. Now, the case of Jane Britton and Ada Bean went cold. And due to the media blackout, there is not a lot of data of what happened. That is, until several lawsuits were filed in 2017 by true crime enthusiasts that they wanted to have the records made public in hopes of solving the Britton case. Another person who was trying to get information was Becky Cooper. She's a New York writer and a fellow Harvard alum. She, along with the others, filed Freedom of Information requests to examine the case records. All of their requests and appeals were denied based on the case still being open and active. Wow. Thank you, true crime enthusiast. I want to say thank you. Cheers to making things happen. Because of your diligence in filing those suits, the Cambridge police decided to dive into the cold case and see if there was anything new that they could look at, or could modern-day technologies help them find the killer. Before they were forced to release the documents to the public, they put together a review team, and they decided to rerun the physical evidence collected at the murder, hoping that new technology could pull out some male DNA. And yes, they got a hit. I am picturing a group of officers doing high fives in a little dance party, or maybe they were tossing donuts when they found out there was a match, which I know is a cliche, but hey, I love donuts too. They had a match. So the police had run that DNA sample through CODIS and gotten a soft hit to a convicted rapist who had died in 2001. Now, damn, I'm glad he is dead and he can't hurt anyone else, but he needed to stand trial. Anyway, the Cambridge Police Department wanted to make sure that the match was positive and that they had the right person. To do this, they needed to test the DNA from Jane's case against a closely related male to the suspect. And researching the family on Ancestry.com led them to the suspect's brother, who gave up a DNA sample. This was it, exactly what they needed. Cambridge police were confident that Michael Sumter was Jane Britton's killer. Michael Sumter had been convicted of 2 rapes, the second one after he escaped from a work release program. Sumter's DNA also matched other crimes. The DNA connected him to the 1972 murder and rape of a 23-year-old named Ellen Rutchick in her Beacon Street apartment in Boston. He was also connected to the 1973 rape and murder of Mary Lee McLean in her Boston apartment, as well as one other unsolved rape, which means that Michael Sumter raped 5 women and killed 3 during his life. Okay, friends, I'm just going to tell you, he's a true piece of shit. He raped, DNA, maybe there's more, but 5 women and killed 3 during his life. Truly a piece of shit. So Sumter died 1 year after he was paroled to hospice care for terminal cancer. Michael Sumter died at the age of 54. Police were able to piece together a bit of Sumter's timeline and circumstantial evidence, which showed Sumter had worked about 1 mile from Jane's apartment, and at the time of her murder, lived with his girlfriend in Cambridge. Also have to tell you, Michael Sumter had a juvenile record, but it was sealed. Police also told reporters that the red ochre, that reddish-brown powder that was found on Jane Britton's case, was nothing but a red herring. Jane Britton's family was not able to see Michael Sumter tried and convicted for Jane's murder, but I am assuming that knowing who did murder her brings some type of closure to them and to the families of Ellen Rutchick and Mary Lee McLean. Sadly, Jane Britton's parents both had passed away before their daughter's killer was identified. However, Jane's brother, Reverend Boyd Britton, released a statement that said, "A half-century of mystery and speculation has clouded the brutal crime that shattered Jane's promising young life and our family. The DNA evidence match may be all we ever have as a conclusion. Learning to understand and forgive remains a challenge." There is no evidence that Michael Sumter knew any of his victims. Sadly, Sumter did not match the evidence in Ada Bean's case, which, as of today, is still unsolved. I hope anyone listening to this podcast who knows anything about Ada Bean's murder, please call the Cambridge, Massachusetts Police Department. Her family deserves closure. I want to tell you about one of the individuals I mentioned earlier who took part in filing those lawsuits for information. And that was Becky Cooper, a former New Yorker editorial staff member. She is releasing a true crime narrative on this case. It is due to be published February of 2020 with a proposed title, We Keep the Dead Close. I personally look forward to reading this book, as my understanding is that Becky Cooper has inside knowledge and has interviewed close friends, and perhaps she'll be able to share information that was not released to the public due to the media blackout. I'm going to take a quick sip. Sorry, I needed that sip because I find it frustrating that the police put a media blackout. Maybe Sumter would have been identified earlier if they hadn't. 50 years without a case being solved, and many people were still suspecting James Humphreys, the boyfriend, or that fellow archaeologist. And I also read that the police department didn't want to get others' helps. They wanted to keep it close to the vest. I'm saying, let's share not everything, because we need to know and be able to identify a suspect, but we need to share things. Keep it out in the public. Get people talking. I hope that the police are doing something to solve Ada Bean's case, which, as I said, did not get a lot of coverage, except for when it came to it being related to Jane's case. Cambridge Police Department, look into her case. Maybe look at the DNA, run it through CODIS, pull out the stops, find what's happened. I want to say our episode today was researched by Terry Dussault, edited by Phil Dussault. Our theme music is by Ada Gold. If you want to support me in true crime and wine time, please go to your favorite podcast app and review us. Honest reviews are always appreciated. You can also interact with me directly on our Facebook page at True Crime and Wine Time, or on Twitter at Terry True Crime. Thank you for listening to True Crime and Wine Time. Until next week, stay safe, watch out for crime, and enjoy your wine time.